So guys, we're online for a long time no see. I have another guest in 1.5 years. We had Mirko back in February 2018. And now I'll talk with Greg, my fellow colleague here in Riga. And so Greg is a prominent person. He's a senior certified associate with the Adizes Institute. And he's working on Adizes transformation program in Europe and around the globe. And he's also Adizes Institute Latvia managing director, and also professor of executive MBA at Riga Business School. So welcome, Greg.
Thanks. Good to be here.
So I was wondering if you could introduce yourself and tell us about what are your core competencies.
Okay. So yeah, I've been working with Adizes for about 10 years now. Of course, I should know a little bit something about business, and I've run my own businesses, and so I do have that competence. But I think really what allows me to work well with businesses is my ability to work with teams of people and to align them and to drive them to common shared decisions. And with that, then to help them to implement those decisions, which is really the important part of what we do. Because, you know, we can make decisions all day long, but if they don't get implemented, it doesn't do much for the company. It's nice to sit around and talk, but in the end of the day, we actually have to get some things done. And so in terms of core competencies, I would say that really it's about, you know, bringing my business knowledge and to a group of people and not really giving them answers about what to do, but being able to draw the answers from them, which is, you know, they have a lot of information in their companies within the management team that doesn't get shared very much. And so how do we get all of that out and on the table and share it and use it to make better decisions that people commit to so that they get implemented much more quickly. And when a company can do that, when a company can really bring its core people together and they can communicate well and get everything out and make quick decisions that they commit to and then implement them, that's really their source of competitive advantage, because they can deal more quickly with a changing environment than their competitors.
Well, that's something. And so if these are your core competencies and you work with companies, maybe you can tell a little bit of you know, what are the companies that you are working with, and what are the current challenges they are facing, you see more often, which is topical problems.
So some recent companies are distribution companies, retail convenience companies, manufacturing companies, food companies. So there's quite a range of different companies. And most of the companies that I work with are in a stage of development where they're still run by the founder of the company for the most part, or the founder is very closely involved with the company, and they're in this stage we call go-go, which is really their growth stage. So they tend to be young in terms of their attitude, right? They may have been around for 20 years, but they're still growing, they're still vibrant, the founder's still running the company, and that tends to be the company that I work with around the globe and also really in Latvia. And some common things that you see in those companies is, you know, they're not very efficient. They have trouble tracking their costs. They have trouble understanding which products are profitable, which ones are losing money. They don't really know. So they may be selling products that are losing money with everyone they sell. They just don't have that information. They don't have the internal infrastructure to really support the strong growth of their company. Another thing we run into is we see the development of functional silos, which is, they divide their company into different departments: a marketing department, a sales, logistics, production, and so on. And each of those departments, what that gives to the company is the ability to specialize people so that they can focus on, just on marketing or just on production. But also what tends to come up then are these silos where production focuses on production and marketing only focuses on marketing, and they don't communicate well and share across the organization. And so that's another big issue that we have to deal with.
Anything else?
Anything else? Sure. Finding good employees, performance, managing performance, building accountability in these people. What tends to happen is that the founder is running the company. Most of the decisions go through the founder. And what that does is when the founder's basically running the company, making most of the decisions, the rest of the company waits to understand what the founder wants to do. It's very difficult for people to take initiative because quite often when they do, the founder comes in and changes what they're trying to do. And so what ends up happening is they wait. And so it's difficult to hold people accountable for their performance in these organizations. And so we also work very heavily on how do we transfer decision-making from the founder to a management team, and how do we build accountability in that management team for carrying out the decisions that they make collaboratively. That's another big area that we work
in. Maybe you can tell also what are the market conditions that you see that companies are facing, at least on the markets that you work with the companies right now.
Well, most of the markets are growing. They're healthy, but they're also very volatile. There's so much change going on constantly. Changes in laws, changes in the political systems, changes in the competition and in technologies. And it's this constant change that is really difficult for companies to manage. It used to be that you could put a product into the market, 50, 60 years ago, you put a product into the market and you could sell it for year after year after year. Today, you put a product in the market and it's already copied in China and Vietnam and other places, and they copy it, they add things to it, and the rollover, the life of a product has shortened so much that companies have to be able to move much more quickly. And when you're working globally, it becomes very difficult to manage, especially if you're just one founder, and the founder ends up becoming the bottleneck. So what we see in these markets are they're very turbulent, they're very dynamic, and a company to be able to work in that environment really needs a team that is strong, that can work together, that they have a lot of respect and trust for each other so that they can make quick decisions and get them implemented. And so in Adizes, when we're working with a company, that's what we're working on building, is how can we get that management team that can thrive in this environment of really chaos, that just constant accelerating change.
Okay. And so now we have a glimpse of the list of problems that companies are facing, and which are connected probably with your core competence. And what of those that you mentioned you would like to talk more about today?
Well, maybe, if we look at companies and we look at functional silos, for instance, and why do these functional silos develop? and what can we do about them, right? And big source of one big issue that's driving companies into different silos. It drives these different units into just focusing on their own unit without really sharing across the organization, is the way that management deals with problems. Right? Now, as a management team managing a company, what typically happens is they have a meeting, they have a set of issues that they have to address, problems that have to be dealt with, and those problems are basically focused in different parts of the organization. So you have production problems, you have marketing problems, sales problems, delivery problems, all these different issues that have to be addressed. And what a management team tends to do is send those problems to the different units, right? Which makes sense. If we have marketing issues, let's give it to the marketing director to deal with. If we've got production issues, our head of production can deal with that, and so on. And that makes sense, but there's some downsides to that, because what happens is that when a marketing gets their set of issues they have to deal with, what do they use as a benchmark for which problems are going to get solved in which order? Really, it's the head of marketing. It looks at his department and says to himself, in prioritizing these problems, which ones are most important for us in marketing? And those are the ones they attack first. And that happens in marketing, that happens in all the other functions as well. And so what this does is it functionalizes problems that you have marketing people working on solutions to marketing problems. When they try to implement them, they don't really work for the other departments. Other departments get frustrated with the solutions because the interests that are being solved with the solutions are the interests of the marketing department. And it happens throughout the company in the different departments. And so what you have is the different department heads are solving problems with the interests of their department in mind. And nobody's looking at these problems from a holistic perspective. Nobody's deciding which of these problems should be resolved in which order as it relates to the health of the entire company. And so what happens then is you get marketing is just dealing with marketing, production with production, and so on. And so what really needs to happen is, instead of one manager dealing with all the department's problems, you need a group of managers that decides which problems are getting solved in which order for the health of the whole company, not department by department. And when you can do this, then you're working on the health of the company rather than the health of individual departments. And you're increasing the communication across the organization. You're prioritizing problems for the health of the organization as a whole, so that that's getting addressed. When we're shipping off problems to different departments, that the entire organization as a whole system doesn't really get addressed. And so in Adizes, what we want to do is, instead of having one manager from a department work on 10 problems, we'd rather have 10 managers across the organization looking at problems one at a time that affect the whole organization, or even one department, and those managers as a team deciding which problems should get solved in which order for the health of the entire organization.
And I have a question. So you explained that how these silos are happening in a company and what to do about it. And I wanted to hear deeper from your experience on you manage some kind of a solution, but I want to understand what happens if the solution is not applied. So what consequences are happening, if this problem is growing constantly and deeper. I'm sure you have some cases to share from your experience, maybe not naming companies, but these situations, they are happening from company to company. So what are these consequences and examples of this problem of having silos in the company?
Sure, that's a good point, and that's something we should discuss. So when we break down into these silos, what happens is that the communication between departments really is stifled. There's not a lot of sharing that goes on across the organization, and each department is focused on its work, and there's nobody looking at the work of the whole organization except maybe the CEO. And so it drives the CEO crazy. The CEO is the one losing sleep at night over the health of the organization. What else happens is that when solutions are created for problems, they're not created with the intent to be good for the entire organization, only for one department. So what happens is that other departments get frustrated with solutions and they blame the department who created the solution, and you have a deterioration of relationships. And so people, they lose respect for one another, they lose trust in each other, they stop seeking each other out to solve problems. And we see this over and over and over again in companies. And then what management tends to do is they think, well, our people aren't communicating, they're not sharing. So what we need is team building. Right? So they hire some company or they just take their people out for a weekend to play some games in the woods, and with the intent to build this stronger relationships, rebuild those relationships. And the issue, is much deeper than that. It's different than that. It's not that people don't like each other. It's not that they have interpersonal problems. The problem is that the way the work's getting done or not getting done frustrates people. And so if you can change how the work's getting done so that it actually helps everybody, a solution is good for all of them, all of a sudden the relationships start to clean up, right? So the relationships are really a manifestation of the way that these problems are being dealt with, the strained relationships. And so, hiring somebody to come in and do team building or doing it on your own is there's nothing wrong with it, and it serves its purpose. But you got to realize that that's not really going to solve the problems of people not sharing across the organization. The reason they don't share is because we break them down in these functional silos, and management drives this process just by the way that they deal with they deal with each unit as a separate unit, handing off issues to each unit to solve on their own. And the result of that is that, each unit then works on its own. And so if you want to build stronger collaboration among your team, the way to do it is to start collaborating. And it's not by going out in the countryside to create problems and solve them. There's plenty of problems in your organization that need to be solved, and to be solved in a cross-functional manner with the right people on problem-solving teams, the people that really are affected by those problems, the stakeholders in those problems, the people that have to implement and live with those solutions. Did that answer your question?
So yeah, I kind of understand deeper the problem. So you said that there is this kind of miscommunication, and it implies that trust and respect is going down, and also this well sleep of the founder of the company is not so good. And so maybe you can tell some story or example from your experience regarding this founder, how he suffers from these silos, and maybe how he misreacts to the situation, and also internally some cases and stories from when these silos are there, and what happened. Really some story example from your experience.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, there's lots of examples. For instance, working with a distribution company where the founder is basically, he's got a company of 270 people doing, 80 million euros a year turnover, and he basically runs everything because his management team can't manage the company. And they work in these silos, and they don't share across the departments and units. And what happens then is that the founder needs to go in to each department and fix solutions so that they're better for the other departments. He has to constantly work on conflict management, dealing with the frustrations between departments because they can't create good solutions that work for everybody, right? A good solution is one that can be implemented. You know, it's not the optimal solution all the time. It's less than optimal, but we can actually implement it. Okay? Optimal solutions are you know, they're usually optimal for one department or one person. They're not optimal for everybody. And so, you know, you have to find solutions that work for everybody. So the founder ends up going around managers, going deep into the organization, working on operational issues, when the founder should be up running the company, and he's constantly having to jump down and deal with operational issues. And then what happens is the managers of those departments feel like they're not trusted, that the founder's constantly going around them and not letting them run their departments. And in fact, they're not really running their departments. They wait for the founder. The founder actually ends up training people to wait for the founder to make a decision. That's what they do. And when people come to the founder with a problem, the founder gives them a solution, when in fact the founder should be sending them out to get solutions themselves. Right? They should be paid not to bring problems to the founder, but to bring solutions to the founder and to implement those solutions. So, you know, the founder in this specific company was really stretched very thin, was completely stressed out, was struggling, and the company was losing money. Was in a few years it had lost several $1 million because it had reached its capacity. The founder just couldn't do anymore. And so we came in and started to work with the management team, working to get the founder out of all of the decision maker. The founder right away, within a few months of us working together with him, found a complete release of a lot of stress in the organization. He said that it basically changed his life, that he was able to sleep much better at night. He was able to let go of his company to a large extent and start to see other people take things over. He was able to calm down, slow down, and let the company start to manage itself.
And so from this example, I heard that the founder, he is going and a little bit maybe more micromanaging his management team. And so I have a question. Isn't that what founder or CEO of the company should be doing? You know, trying to connect dots between different departments. And another thing, if these people down him, the managers of departments, they are waiting from the solution, how it relates with the thing that you said previously on a situation on the market that the change is accelerating, and it demands, you know, decision faster than it used to be. So can you tell from these two perspectives, is it something that CEO should do in the company, you know, manage conflicts between departments and maybe their decisions, and if he does so too much and management of departments are waiting for his decisions, how it impacts the speed of change within a company comparing to market?
Sure. So on the first issue, I mean, I think anybody that's been in management for some period of time understands that the CEO should not be micromanaging things. That just causes a lot of problems. You know, you get into situations, in crisis situations, it may be necessary for a CEO to really jump in and become a dictator and and start to micromanage things. But that's a very specific situation where the company is basically on the line in a crisis situation, or you're in threat of losing key customers, something like that. And so at that point, the CEO might have to step in and micromanage things and become more autocratic. But the role of a CEO, once the company gets out of its startup stage and is starting to really grow, the role of the CEO should be to build a management team that can work together to basically run the company. The CEO should become the guiding force and the glue that holds it all together, that can manage. There's always going to be conflict. You mentioned conflict. The conflict is there. The conflict is healthy. It needs to be there. If there is no conflict, nothing ever changes. Right? Without conflict, we just remain the same all the time. And so conflict is healthy, and it can be healthy. It's not always healthy, but it's the CEO's job to make the conflict healthy, to get the different people to be able to learn from each other. And that's really a key for this organization. Everything we're talking about is how can an organization quickly learn and adapt to changing environments, and do it proactively. Right? So that's really should be the CEO's role. Overall role is to build a management team that can work together and run the company basically without the CEO. Right? And then the CEO's job evolves into driving the company into new markets and growing it and things like that. Right? And what was the second part of your question?
Yeah. And you mentioned that this company, in your case, an example, they were facing financial difficulties. And how much is this, to your mind, connected with this silos communication problem, so that people waited for decision? And so is it a big share of the big problem of the company, or there are other problems, or just marketing going down or something?
So, in different companies, the situation will be different. Losing money is a manifestation. It's the end result of many things that are going on inside the company. And you can't pinpoint it on one thing. Certainly functional silos will add to that. In this case, one of the driving forces was the CEO, in his effort to build this company and run everything himself, made a set of decisions that cost the company a lot of money, trying to head it off in different directions. And part of that came about because of his frustration with the direction the company was going in, with the inability of his managers to take responsibility, to be held accountable for things. And so he decided on his own that he was going to try new things with the company. And he didn't have a management team that could really challenge him and say, wait a minute, maybe that's not a good idea. Instead, they just, whatever he said, they would do it. And he ended up losing the company a lot of money, several $1 million over a period of a few years. And that's again one of the consequences of not having a strong management team. Is who is it that keeps this founder who has a lot of energy, which is why they were able to build this company in the first place. They have vision, they have energy, they're exciting, they're charismatic, and they can build this company. But at some point, this person can overextend the company, send it in the wrong directions. And in this case, there was no management team there to second guess the founder, to say, wait a minute, this isn't really a good idea. And that CEO, part of his role is to send the company in new directions. But he needs a management team there a healthy management team that can function as a check, that can help the CEO make better decisions, because the CEO doesn't know everything. He needs to understand better the market dynamics, the products, how much money is needed, what are the risks involved, and a CEO by definition, any person by definition, doesn't have strengths in all of those different roles. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And the way for a CEO to overcome his weaknesses or her weaknesses so that they make better decisions is to have a strong management team that can compensate for their weaknesses. So first of all, that means, you have to accept your weaknesses. You have to acknowledge them, and then look for people that have strengths in those areas. And that will exercise those strengths, and they aren't afraid to tell you when you are wrong or when they believe you're wrong. But that requires a lot of trust from the whole management team. So that becomes very important.
And okay, I'm getting that. But my question is, so it looks like the situation with silos is really complicated, and as you said, it's one of the parts of the consequences companies are facing. And probably in this format, we will not be able to cover in a week, trying to discuss everything like that. But I'm sure you have some, really simple advice that it's not a big change to do in a company. And if somebody who is watching this video could say, "Oh, yeah, I see we have this silos problem in my company. I understand we can do a lot, but this one thing practical that people could implement tomorrow and change something and do something different. Maybe you can share this small trick with us that people could do tomorrow."
Uh-huh. All right. So, there's different things to do depending where you are in the organization. Of course, if you're CEO, it's easier to implement because you have the power to do that. You have the authority to do that. But in a nutshell, one of the things that you can do is to create your top management team, and create a special meeting for that top management team that meets perhaps once a month, but regularly every month. And their job is to basically collect the issues, the burning issues in the company. Not only the burning issues, also long-term development issues. And then as a group, prioritize those issues and decide which ones get solved in which order. Okay? And what this does is it focuses the group on the whole organization, the health of the whole organization, and what is best to do for the organization today and tomorrow. What steps should we take right away to deal with these different issues that we have going on? Once they prioritize that, then, because you have the whole management team there together, they can decide which people from which departments should work on solving that issue, right? It's very rare that a problem in, for instance, marketing, the problem and the solution to that problem will only affect the marketing department. That's very rare. If you're going to put in place a solution, which is a new advertising campaign or what, that affects finance. They have to maybe approve a new budget. Also, maybe it affects the sales department because they have to, they understand their customers better. They know what customer needs are. And so any advertising campaign should address those customer needs. And maybe that information doesn't exist in marketing. Right? So you have the management team together, and they should look at who are the key people from across the organization that have the knowledge about this issue and have to implement this issue and put them together in a team. they have the authority to do that. And they can say this team is going to work for a certain number of weeks and come up with a solution. That doesn't normally happen when you ship off problems to different departments to deal with, because the head of marketing cannot go to a person in finance and tell them they have to come to a meeting. What they have to do is go to the head of finance and say, can I borrow that person for a meeting? And maybe they say yes, maybe not. And if it's multiple meetings, it becomes more complex. And, you know, the head of finance has their problems that they're working on. And you know, this marketing issue is not really a priority for finance, at least in the mind of the finance director. So when you get everybody together in a room, though, and they're discussing these issues, and they can talk about how it affects the different parts of the organization, and they can bring those people together to actually work on those issues. Okay? And then, so that's the decision-making side of it. What that team also needs to do is set strict deadlines. They need to say, you know, you have 2 3-hour meetings to come up with a solution, this team. And they need to hold them to that. Because at the end of the day, if we don't work by deadlines, we can't ever get anything done, because we can discuss and discuss and discuss for forever. So, you know, what is a realistic deadline for this team to solve this problem? Turn them loose, let them come up with the solution. On that team, there needs to be a person that will be responsible for implementation. So that, and what you're doing is you're giving all of these people a chance to influence the decision. They're going to be responsible for implementing it. They have key knowledge about the problem, and now they have the opportunity to shape the decision. And the idea is that you need to find a decision that everybody can live with. And we don't want voting. We don't want consensual decision making. We want one person who says, yes, this is what we're going to do. And everybody says, yes, I can live with that. And when you can get that, then you have commitment to carry out the decision, and you have much higher likelihood that implementation is going to go through. So, you know, in a nutshell, that's one idea, is to create that top management team that will prioritize problems, what order they should be solved in, who should be working on solving these issues, and giving them a time frame for when it should be done, and making sure that on each of those teams there is a person there who has authority over the implementation of that solution.
Sounds simple enough. And more of that, I'm sure you can share more solutions that you have in mind from your experience and knowledge base. Can you tell us what's happening, you know, in other format that people can come and talk with you, or, you know, learn from you? Are there any courses or consulting or conferences that you are attending when people can come and ask more questions?
Well, sure. I mean, I'm always open to talk to people, and you know, anybody can contact me and we can have a meeting and talk. But as far as formal things are, I mean, if you're a student at Riga Business School, you're going to take one of my classes at least, because it's a required course, and we talk a lot about these issues there. And then, you know, we have a set of seminars and workshops going on a regular basis. This month we will have a workshop. It's entitled Breakthrough to Prime, and what we will be working on in that workshop is what does management need to do to move its company to the next stage of development. And we'll be talking about a lot of these issues that we've covered today, and we'll go into and others, and we'll go into them in more detail about, you know, why do things happen in companies the way they do? What should be done about those issues, and how to carry out change. So we will be working a lot on change management, which is really what all of this is about. is being able to deal with ongoing change. And so that workshop happens the end of this month, September 24 and 25, and you can find more information about it on our Adizes Latvia Facebook page. Other things that are going on is we will have in October a 7-day, very intensive training on how to lead problem-solving teams. So it's really, there's a month preparation for this course, which is done online, meaning, you know, reading materials, taking exams, and just getting prepared, and then showing up for 7 days to go through a very intense program on how to facilitate problem-solving teams, which is really an important topic. You know, many meetings end up being dysfunctional. They don't work very well. What happens is you go into a meeting, you discuss an issue, a decision is reached, everybody says, I agree, I agree. They leave. When you leave, it's time to go implement. But what happens is you go out in the hallway and the next meeting starts, in which people say, oh, they didn't talk about this, and I don't think that will work, and on and on and on. So what we're going to work on over these 7 days is how do you run a meeting so that when the meeting's done and people are ready to go implement? How do you run a meeting where you actually, through the meeting, you surface the conflict, you deal with conflicts, you use those conflicts as learning opportunities, and you get everything out from the participants in the meeting so that you can make a better decision, and a decision that everyone can live with, and that is taken at the end of the day by the person who has authority to implement that decision. And then they go off and implement. So we'll be running that in October 7th through 14th, I believe. And you know, if you want to take part in that, it's a very intensive but strong course. Also, October 31st, we have.
Zach, to whom you would recommend this intensive training? Because it sounds complicated.
Right. So it sounds complicated. You know, I would look at this, if you're a business owner, who do you have in your company that, and a lot of times they come from the HR department for whatever reasons, but for numerous reasons, but who in your company do you have that is good with people, that can challenge people, that is able to challenge authority? And sometimes those people are very hard to find, especially if you're in one of these go-go companies where the founder's running everything. These people, they may be hidden in your company, and it may not be apparent because of the culture in the company. But somebody like that who is good with people, who is willing to challenge people. Also, CEOs can take part in this, business consultants, and so on. All right.
If you say somebody who can challenge people and is good with people, to me it sounds like a project manager.
A project manager, actually, the project manager is the person who has authority for running the project. And so I would not suggest the project manager as the person that's going to be a team facilitator. What they need is somebody, they should be they're part of the team. They're helping to make the decision. They need somebody who doesn't have really a stake in the decision, but whose interest is just to make sure that a process is followed so that a good decision is made. All right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good. And so I interrupted you. You wanted to continue. What's next where people can learn more?
Sure. Then at the end of October, on October 30th, I believe it is. Yes, October 30th. Dr. Ichak Adizes himself will be in Riga for a one-day seminar. And so I encourage anybody and everybody that's interested in learning more about what we've been talking about today to go and see Dr. Adizes. you know, this methodology, we've talked about little tiny parts of it today, but this is really a different way to manage an organization. It's much more about collaborative management. It's how do we make better use of our resource of people? How do we build a culture in which people can thrive, in which people feel alive, in which people can, you know, they seek each other out in the hallways to solve problems and to drive initiatives and things like that. And that's really what companies are looking for. And we have the methodology to do that. Dr. Adizes will be here the end of October to share some of that. And so I encourage anybody that's interested in learning more about it to go and see Dr. Adizes. And so that's what we have for the next 2 months in Adizes, Latvia.
Cool. So I really enjoyed today's insights, and I see there is a lot to learn. And I'm just curious if you would like to continue and create a set of interviews with me on these topics, and maybe you could highlight what more you can share with us.
Yeah, sure. That would, I think that's an interesting idea. And, you know, we can, first of all, we can put our own ideas out there about, you know, how do you build accountability? How do you deal with structure? How do you better manage conflict? What are sources of conflict and how to deal with the different sources of conflict? Right? What is the conflict between decision-making and implementation, and how to manage that well? So there's a lot of different issues we can cover. And I think what would also be interesting is if we can hear from listeners some issues that they're dealing with, and we can talk about those and what they might do in their different cases to relieve some of the pressures and problems that they're facing. So yeah, I would really like, I would be interested in that. I think this is an interesting format, and it would be great to help as many people as possible with some of the management issues that they're dealing with.
Sounds like a good idea. So guys, if you are watching this video, we'll try to schedule like in a timely manner for like 2 and 3 weeks ahead when would be another interview. And you can write in comments here for this video or for the scheduled interview with Greg, what you would like to hear more about from what Greg has mentioned. And maybe your topics, what problems are you facing, and you expect some insight and which could help you with your issues in managing a company. And thanks, Greg. That should be all for today. It was a pleasure.
Thanks. And, good luck, everybody. Good managing. Talk to you again soon.
See you. Bye-bye.